Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Bashful Corpse. Here's an excerpt from the booklet. Recorded winter 2013 through winter 2015, New York City, in the spirit of homelessness. Listen at night while snow falls silently under streetlights. What we're listening to today is Dragonflies to Sew You Up from the artist PRURIENT? PRURIENT? Why can't I say that? I can say PRURIENT, I just don't want to put that R after the P. PRURIENT. That looks like a word I should be able to pronounce very clearly. Anyways, this comes off of the Frozen Niagara Falls album from 2015. Let's dive into this. See what's going on with Dragonflies to Sew You Up. Interesting combination of the lightness of the acoustic guitar and the heaviness of this percussion. There's almost an elegance to the melodic and harmonic component that isn't present at all in the percussion and vocals. And it's creating a very clashing element to the song. It's an interesting palette that the song is being painted with. I kind of like those moments as like chapter markers, but I don't really see their purpose other than contrast. That's a nice little loop. There's a cool, very low saw synth coming in. It's drowned out by the percussion though. We can hear it clearly here, I like that. Slight detuning, sonic destruction. Alright. I think the clearest element to this is the division of sounds. The constant aggressive dual percussion, almost as if it's something adjacent to a snare and a bass kick, constantly firing off together. Yeah, eighth notes, constant eighth notes on those. It's a heavy, aggressive sound, and it's given prominence in the mix too. It is impossible not to focus on it, and it overpowers pretty much everything else. I didn't even realize that the synth was a synth for a long time until we had that isolated moment where the drums left for a second, and I got to hear all the synth parts together in isolation. I really got to hear the colorings, the textures of them. I had pointed out the lower end sawtooth synth that came in like 2 minutes in, but it was really something I just caught a glance of. It was really hard to hear with that aggressive pounding above it. And so I really like that moment where I get to hear all these instruments, but the percussion just dominates everything. The vocals are also exceptionally loud, overpowering everything else that's present too. I think with the drums being the only thing that is maybe on par or louder than the vocals, there is a ton of production to give them extra width, extra compression. It is a very large sound. This is contrasted heavily with all of the synth work in here, which is lighter and more dexterous. It's almost has a brightness to it, and it feels as if it's supposed to be painting a completely different picture. Even melodically, where the drums are just the same tone over and over, we have the melody. Granted, it is a smaller loop coming out of the synth, but it's still a melodic movement. The pitch changes, the rhythm changes, there's small bits of syncopation to it, there's growth and decay as far as pitches are concerned, a rising and falling of sound. While we do hit a rather repetitive dun 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 dun, kind of going above and returning to home, above, returning to home, coming back down, returning to home, this repeated idea, there is a moment in here where the melody ends up taking on something a bit more syncopated against the core beat. And we actually hear something that shifts its accent points around. It is short-lived, but there is some variation in the melody is what I'm pointing towards. Then we have the drone of the lower synth, which kind of fits more in with the heavy aggressive banging of the drums. I wouldn't say that it perfectly sides with that. It sort of sits in the middle of being this heavy weight, but not being aggressive about it. Just something that idly stands by. And that's the song. You get 5 minutes of that. What changes is layers. We don't always have the moving synth idea. We don't always have the bassy synth. We don't always have the drums. We don't always have the vocals. These get added and removed in different places. The drums end up becoming this sort of hazy sound for moments at a time. I'm still not entirely sure what that's supposed to represent. It does give me a moment to hear the synthesizers in a little bit more clarity, but otherwise, as far as I interpret it. As far as my relationship to it, it acts as a momentary respite from the pounding of the drums, which I am not a fan of. It really takes the heavy repetition of percussion sound and timbre that I dislike taken to the extreme of, like, black metal. Blast beats, just holding on to them for an extended period of time, and makes that the entire song. There is no change to the percussion at all. I think the only way to have made it worse was to bump it up to 16th notes rather than the 8th notes we got. I did not like that. But removing them and giving us this hazy, reverbed version of it, I think kind of, like I said, if nothing else, it gives me a moment to breathe, to relax, to find something, some sort of enjoyment in this. And maybe enjoyment's the wrong word. I don't think I liked this song in its entirety. It's not something I think I'm going to come back to, but it gave me a moment to just not be in agony, if that makes sense. That might be too harsh of a word, but I really don't like the percussion in this at all. It's just, it might be artistically sound, but from a standpoint of did I enjoy listening to this? No, not at all. We have those moments of, creating a small change. But we also have some sounds that kind of come and go. There was one use of sort of turning on white noise, like turning on a radio with no signal coming in. It lasted for 4 seconds, 5 seconds, and then it was gone. Sometimes we have the vocals, sometimes we don't. The vocals are rather static in their delivery as well. I mean, nothing changes. Again, we just get different combinations of the layers. It creates something that kind of feels amorphous. It is all of what it is, but not always all of what it is at the same time, if that makes sense. But it's entirely static. It never becomes anything else. The song is definitely this, never seeking to find a different way to explore that. It's just what this is can change a little bit. Maybe it was square at one time, but it's circle now. However, the texture and color of it and the fact that it morphs is all the same. And so I try to figure out what any of this is supposed to mean. There's obviously anger in here. I would wager that the heaviness of the percussion is not supposed to be enjoyable. And it's contrasted heavily with brightness, with elegance, with beauty. Why put something so disgusting and pair it with something gorgeous? That I don't know. There's a lot of ways that lyrics could use that sort of musical element to heighten their storytelling. It could be two sides of the same coin kind of idea with somebody who's two-faced, or an event that is both positive and negative. It could be an event that, a memory where it's bittersweet. You have good feelings and bad feelings about it. I don't think that this is necessarily the best representation of bittersweet. I think that would be a bit of a rougher connection there. But any way that you could create a narrative that has dual opposing emotions to it, I think this could work with. As long as those opposing emotions are one of elegance or beauty or joy's not right here. And the other, though, is agony, pain, anger, something in that realm. And I guess with that said, let's dive into some lyrics here and see what's going on there. Alright, these lyrics are interesting, but there's no beauty to this at all. I don't see any silver lining, any dual emotions. If anything, it's sort of under emotional. It's also hidden in metaphor. Some of it I don't think works too well, others are interesting. Verse 1 says, in August, you're overdressed, plywood broken upon impact, the meat is thinly sliced, car horns blare outside. Verse 2 says, in August, you're overdressed, plywood broken upon impact, key twists inside the lock, kitchens are murderous places. The refrain simply repeats, are you going mad in there? Are you rotting in there? We hear those two lines repeatedly. I would never have picked this up if not for the annotation here. It says the song tells a chilling story of two lovers. One is in a car wreck and the other attempts to save them. Going back, we can see that the phrase, the meat is thinly sliced and car horns blare outside, could be a description of the accident itself and the wounds that this person has taken on from the car crash itself. The car horns blaring outside could be the other person from the other car laying on, the horn. Verse 2 says, key twists inside the lock. It could be that this person's trying to open the door. But despite having a key, the door refused to open. The idea of kitchens are murderous places, I feel, is a bit forced. Going back to the idea of the meat being thinly sliced, it's a weird description, I think, of somebody who has cuts from a car accident. But if they're going to stick with this, this is probably the best way to go about it, to continue on with the idea of kitchens where meat would be sliced. But to call them murderous places, I think things begin to fall apart here. The place where where animals become meat is a slaughterhouse, not the kitchen. The kitchen just prepares the meat. So it actually, even in a more traditional sense, where the metaphor would come from, it's not true. Most kitchens aren't murderous places, whether it's your home kitchen or a restaurant kitchen. But then the idea here is that the car becomes a kitchen and she is killed there. But is she murdered? Doesn't murder require intent? This would be manslaughter, which would not make it a murderous place either. And how is this? I mean, did this person just die from the accident? I'm not a huge fan of that one line. And since there's only 12 lines in the whole song, having a 12th of them and another line, so a sixth of them by proxy, not being too great, kind of diminishes my relationship to the words. But then we also have the outro, and here I'm just not. No. Well, it's interesting. Let me explain. The outro says, rough scarecrow caught on fire. I promise I will only fuck prostitutes. What is a rough scarecrow? Are we talking about the person in the car? Did the car catch fire? Also, I just thought about this. Plywood broken. Do cars have plywood? Maybe in the floorboards? I don't know, but the frame is not. The frame, the dashboard, I mean, none of that's plywood. What? Plywood broken upon impact. So then we wouldn't be talking about literal plywood, just like when it says the meat is thinly sliced, we're not talking about literal, deli meat, right? I don't get that line now that I think about it. I mean, it would be talking about bones, right? The bones are broken and the flesh is sliced up. But I don't understand how the two would. I don't understand the metaphor. But anyways, this too. I don't. What is a rough scarecrow? But then the final line, I don't like at all. I just think it's a disgusting line. But I think it's an interesting view into this character, or maybe by proxy also the lyricist, though as usual, I don't want to make that jump, but it is, art is a reflection of the artist. So there's always that too. Sometimes there's more of a division than others. But the idea here is, I will never love again. You were the greatest love of my life, and I'm not going to fall in love with anyone ever again. But I have needs, right? And that part just it makes it feel kind of gross to me. It's a really it showcases an element of the character here that I just can't agree with. I don't like. And so I'm walking away from this song not really understanding how the music and the lyrics work, not really enjoying the music by itself, and not really enjoying the lyrics either. There is some neat attempts, I think, to do something a bit more with the language. It just never quite clicks for me. Musically, I like trying to smash together these two totally disparate ideas of, the brighter moving synth and the heavy, rigid, aggressive percussion and vocals, but it never quite clicks for me. And I don't see how all of it comes together either. But those are just my thoughts on Prurient's Dragonflies to Sew You Up. I don't get the title either, although that feels like it might be a bit more personal. Dragonflies might have something to do with the characters of the story here. Maybe that's explored elsewhere. Maybe it's a personal thing from real life that the artist has about dragonflies and loved ones or something. I don't know. What are your thoughts, though? Your opinions, your perspectives. Do you agree with what I said? Do you have a totally different take on things? Please put all that down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.